live long and prosper. So in this video series, I'm going to be talking through the social justice elements of every episode of the original series of Star Trek. The thing that inspired this project was actually a Fox News article which argued that Star Trek has in some way betrayed its traditional commitment to sort of political neutrality or middle ground by embracing progressive politics. In this series, we're going to see that Star Trek has always embraced progressive politics, and it's always been aspirational for social justice in various senses. I am taking a broad perspective on social justice here, so that may include multiple different types of social justice, whether that's racial, whether that's economic, whether that's religious, whether that's abilities, gender and sexuality, anything broadly considered. I will go through every episode. Some of the episodes I will interview fellow Trekkies and talk with them about it. And then below, in the descriptions, I will give you additional information about the episodes, particularly their original air date, who wrote the screenplay, and who directed that episode. I also want to dedicate this series to my dad, Michael Allen Zapkin. He was an OG Trekkie from back in the day, and it was watching the original series with him that I came to love Star Trek. In this video, we're going to talk about the episode The Doomsday Machine, which features some of the most spectacular acting in an episode famous, or in a series famous for spectacular acting. We get William Wyndham, who plays Commodore Matt Decker, who gives us one of the most Oscar-worthy performances when the Enterprise crew find him on the ruined hulk of his own ship, the Constellation. So basically what happens in this episode, the Enterprise is going into a particular sector of the galaxy, and they're like, holy shit, all the planets and stuff that were here have been destroyed. We don't know of anything that could do this. And then they find the destroyed frame, basically, of the USS Constellation, one of the other starships in the fleet. Kirk, Scotty, and a couple of random crew members beam across to try and sort of figure out what happened. They find Commodore Matt Decker. He is and McCoy goes as well. He's in a state of shock. And he tells them that the Constellation fought what he calls a planet killer. Basically, giant robotic machine out in space that just moves along, breaks up planets, uses them for fuel, moves along to break up more planets and use them for fuel, etc., etc. The Constellation tried to stop it and basically got ruined. Yeah, William Wyndham, some amazing acting in this scene. He tells Kirk that he beamed his crew down to the third planet in this system. And Kirk's like, Matt, there is no third planet. And Matt Decker, I'm going to try and do my impression of it. It's not going to be good. But you're in for a treat of bad acting. And Matt Decker is like, don't you think I know that? There was, but not anymore! Ah! Yeah, that's what it is. Bad acting imitated badly.
Matt, where's your crew?
On the third planet.
There is no third planet.
Don't you think I know that? There was, but not anymore. Thank God.
So that's what happens. McCoy takes Decker back onto the Enterprise. Kirk and Scotty and the random crew members stay on the Constellation to try and get it basically functional again for like minimal salvaging, I guess. Then the Planet Killer shows up. Giant, like, space eel type thing made out of neutronium, I think is what it is. Some impenetrable material. It starts coming after the Enterprise. Spock, in command of the Enterprise, flees, and then Matt Decker is like, hey, as a Commodore, I'm taking over. We're going to attack the Planet Killer. And Spock is like, that is not going to work. We are all going to die. And then Matt Decker's like, well, too bad, because we've got to stop it, no matter what it takes. The attack is unsuccessful. The Enterprise is severely damaged, barely able to get away from the Planet Killer. And it loses the capacity even to sort of get far enough away that it could contact Starfleet and let them know that this crazy shit is going down. So Matt Decker is not popular with the crew. On the Constellation, Kirk has sort of gotten the viewing screen going. He's got some basic maneuverability. He's got one phaser bank. So he actually ends up attacking the Planet Killer to draw its attention away from the Enterprise. But then the Constellation gets the Planet Killer's full attention and doesn't really have any defenses. Then Matt Decker is basically like, peace out, I'm going to take a shuttlecraft and I'm going to drive straight into the center of the Planet Killer, try and destroy it. Doesn't work, but Kirk is like, maybe actually it pointed us in the right direction. And so he has Scotty rig up an explosion basically on the Constellation. They set the Constellation on course to go into the Planet Killer and then explode inside it. There's some transporter trouble on the Enterprise because the ship basically got severely damaged when it attacked the Planet Killer. And at the last possible second, they managed to beam Kirk off the Constellation before it explodes and actually destroys the Planet Killer from the inside. So that's the episode. So what's going on here in terms of social justice? Well, the biggest one, obviously, is this concern with MAD, or mutually assured destruction, which was the concept that was developed during the Cold War around nuclear weapons proliferation. Basically, the idea was that both sides, or all sides, the US, the Soviet Union, and then later the People's Republic of China, when they sort of broke with the Soviet Union, that all of these major players would develop enough nuclear weapons and nuclear defenses that any nuclear attack would mean that everybody was destroyed. So, if the US launched a nuclear strike against Moscow, the Soviet Union would have enough nuclear weapons and enough defensive capabilities that they would retaliate with nuclear strikes that would destroy the US. Everybody dies. Which seems actually like a terrible goal. But the idea, and Kirk talks about this very directly, this idea of the Doomsday Machine, what Kirk says is that it was used primarily as a bluff. It was never meant to be deployed. Basically, the idea was both the US, the Soviet Union, and then later the People's Republic of China, and any other major nuclear powers. I mean, we see this, for instance, with India and Pakistan in their conflict. The idea basically was, if anyone uses nuclear weapons, it kills everybody. And so everybody has an incentive to not do it. But because everybody has the potential to do it, you have to take seriously issues on the international stage. So when the U.S. threatens to use nuclear weapons if the Soviets don't withdraw their missile bases from Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yes, if the US had launched nuclear weapons over that, it would have wiped out the vast majority of, if not all of, human life on the planet. But nonetheless, the US had the capability to do that. So this is the idea of the Doomsday Machine, right? Is everyone is destroyed if anyone uses it, and therefore everyone has an incentive not to use it, but the threat remains. Kirk postulates that the planet killer was a doomsday device created by civilization outside our galaxy, and somebody used it. And it probably destroyed that civilization by carving up their planets and ingesting them for fuel. And then it just sort of made its way into our galaxy because doomsday devices don't give a shit. They doom. That is what they do. Does exactly what it says on the tin. Doomsday devices are indiscriminately destructive by their very nature, and that's what we see with the planet killer in this episode. So in the 60s, this was a very, very important concern. This idea of mutually assured destruction, the proliferation of nuclear weapons, etc., etc. There were a lot of anti-nuclear arms activists, demonstrations, etc., etc. And this fear makes its way significantly into popular culture. The Godzilla series is probably one of the most prominent examples of this. But if you look back at old sort of 50s and early 60s schlock sci-fi movies, there's so many of these that are premised on, oh, radiation has made this ant 30 feet tall, or has mutated the human survivors of this nuclear holocaust into horrific monsters, or whatever it is. And so these sort of concerns about nuclear conflict, about radiation, about all of these things were very much in the zeitgeist of the times. And while the Enterprise crew is ultimately successful at destroying the planet killer, stopping the Doomsday device, through the destruction of the constellation, an incredibly valuable resource, it is worth... So while there's ultimately a sort of happy ending, it is worth noting millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people, I forget if they give the population of the systems that have been destroyed or not. Massive numbers of people have died by the time that the planet killer is stopped. And there is speculation what that's rooted in, other than Kirk's imagination. It's unclear. But there's speculation that the civilization that built the Doomsday device was itself destroyed by that device. And so there's a very clear anti-nuclear weapons message here. This is very straightforward and direct, I think. These concerns that, and again, this is a thing we often see in Star Trek, is these contemporary concerns being reflected into the future in order to be like, hey, this is fucking dangerous and stupid, and we should not maybe have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet multiple times over. So that's obviously the big one in the Doomsday Machine. That's the one that's overtly discussed. Again, Kirk makes mention of the H-bomb. So this idea of like nuclear deterrence, of sort of building bigger and better weapons that can destroy the whole planet in the context of the 1960s, that's definitely one of your issues you're looking at. I'd say the other big issue that really strikes me is structures of authority are called into question here, which is very, very interesting for a show premised on essentially we're part of the military. I mean, yes, the Enterprise is a scientific vessel, it's a diplomatic vessel, etc., etc., but fundamentally this is a military organization, it's organized along military lines, etc., etc. Commodore Decker, based on the rulebook, has every right to take command of the Enterprise. And yet, Kirk orders Spock to relieve him of command. Not clear that Kirk has the authority to do that. Decker is, sort of by common consent, decided not fit for command because he does things that imperil the crew. But it is worth noting, there's a previous episode, I can't remember which one it is, I think it's the Apple, in which Spock says to Kirk, no one ever said that Starfleet service was particularly safe. I mean, this is a military organization. There is a clear threat to the galaxy. The planet killer is on course to go through the most populous part of the galaxy. Decker is not entirely wrong that the Enterprise has an obligation to attempt to stop it. The fact that the Enterprise does not have the power or ability to stop it short of suicide, and even at that point they don't know that that would work anyway, doesn't necessarily change that, in fact. To a certain degree, this is a kind of mutiny that Kirk and Spock launch against Commodore Decker. He is a Commodore, he outranks Kirk. He can take over the Enterprise if he wants, and he can order it to do what he wants it to do. But what's presented here is, oh, he's not in his proper state of mind, and therefore it's okay if we don't follow his orders, if we don't accept his authority, etc., etc. Not necessarily clear that that works within the hierarchical structure of Starfleet. So again, we have this sort of questioning of authority in a really interesting way in a show that has a vested interest in structures of authority.